back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Nightmare Man, the first story in Series 4 of the Sarah Jane Adventures, written by Joseph Libster and is directed by Josh Agnew. This story is part of Series 4, which, for those of you who don't know, is the last full series of the Sarah Jane Adventures after, sadly, Elizabeth Sladen passing away before the series Series 5 could really get into heel. So Series 5 only had I think 3 episodes, 3 stories. So this is the last full series in the era. And also as well, this story has a lot of behind the scenes details on it. For example, Tommy Knight, who plays Luke Smith, he had to leave the series for a majority of stories because he was studying for his GCSEs, as he was an actual teenager when Sarah Jane Adventures was in production. Unlike the actors for Clive and Rani, who were actually adults that just looked like kids. They were in their early 20s, but they looked a lot younger. But Tommy Knight was actually a kid, and sadly this would be his last full appearance in the series. I believe he has cameos in stories after this. I haven't actually seen majority of stories after this by the time I'm making this video. It also as well features the last regular appearance of K9 in the series, despite him only having really a handful of moments throughout the series. This was due to the fact that, as we've been discussing through the vlog, Bob Baker was actually trying to get his K9 series on the run. He wanted to get his series on the run. So he was a lot less forgiving of the character for the BBC to lend. Because for those of you who don't know, in the 60s, 70s and some of the 80s, the BBC had a policy that a writer can keep the copyright of their character if they so choose, and so the BBC don't actually own K9. The BBCs don't actually own the Daleks, that's to the Terra Nation estate, and K9 is owned by Bob Baker, the writer who created K9, and so he wanted to get his show off the air. He wanted to go in. It is very strange in this vlog series how you got 2 K9s going around, but what can you do? And so K9 in this story, which is actually the only time he gets a proper story. He's in there quite a bit in this story. He gets a lot of screen time, which is very unusual. But it's his last regular appearance. Now, before I even talk about the story and the general opinion, which I always do in this marathon, it is important to note that this story was the first story since the wedding of Sarah Jane to be novelised in the Sarah Jane Adventures. Why is this important? Why do I have to bring this up? Well, you see, in the novelisation, they keep in some deleted scenes, and they keep in some details from the original script that weren't in the Ed version, which is important to this story because there's a heavy implication that Luke Smith is actually a homosexual. He's actually a gay character who his romantic interests are in men. And Russell T Davies and CBBC, strangely enough, you would think the CBBC would be against it, but no, they were actually pushing to get this storyline on the go. And Russell T Davies was always very prominent to get this character to be this kind of person. And if it was to play out, sadly it was not to be, but if it was to play out, that would have been a huge cultural impact, not just for Doctor Who, but for British television, as he would be the first gay character to appear in not only a show dedicated to children, but essentially a kids show airing on CBBC. That would have been mental. And, you know, with homophobia and everything, that would have been a huge milestone for the series. But sadly, it was not meant to be. We haven't had a reason as to why these scenes got cut. Like I stated, from what I can gather, the CBBC were all for it. Whether it was the main BBC enterprise or another part of the production company, or maybe they just got cold feet. They didn't go, none of this actually aired. They did plan to continue it on if the series continued. However, because of Elizabeth Sladen's passing, that wasn't meant to be. Now, onto the story itself. The general opinion is that this story is really good, and it is considered by many as one of the best stories in the series. This was the first time I watched this story. I was expecting it to be good because, as I've stated in my last vlog episode, Dream Eater, talking about the K9 episode, I'm a huge sucker for dream episodes, dream stories and franchises, because you can go one of two ways. You can either make it really personal to the characters, or you can just go really balls to the walls weird. And always, like, the character stuff is always the strongest stuff, but it's always just interesting to see the weird stuff. And sadly, that story, Dream Eater, didn't take advantage of that. I was not expecting, going into this, to have a absolutely new favourite story for the Sarah Jane Ventures. It's easily now my new favourite story, but also as well, it's easily one of my favourite Doctor Who stories. It's up there. I would put it in the top 10, easy. Holy moly, was this good. This is really, really gripping television. And what's really great about this story is that not only does it continue on and play with the emotional strings of the characters that we've grown up with, and plays on the characters that we've known and their emotional states and their trademarks that we've been, grown up to the series, like the storylines and stuff. But also as well, you could easily watch this story on its own and you still get the characters, the emotions, and what they are wanting. It's just that if you watch the story as part of the Sarah Jane Adventure legacy, you're just much more gripped with it because you have that previous connection. And that is what I say is the best kind of story that does this storyline, story arc, story heavy things well, where you can watch it on its own, you can watch it self-contained, and it works. It really works. But the fact that these are playing on ideas that we've been tackling on throughout the series, it just makes this story just 10 times better. What am I on about? Well, the story starts off with Luke basically giving a message to everyone. Reminds me a lot of Torchwood. Now let's talk about Torchwood, oddly enough, because there's a lot of elements in this story that reminds me a lot of Torchwood. As you, at the start of the story, you have Luke basically recording himself giving a message. He talks about the Doctor, and he talks about how the Doctor saves the world and everybody's and all of his friends, but now he can't save him, and now tomorrow it's the end of the world. Reminds me a lot of Gwen's video from Children of Earth. Yeah, it's almost identical. It's really strange. I don't know if Joseph Libster watched Torchwood, but there's also other elements in this story that makes me feel like it's Torchwood. We'll get onto those. We'll talk about it in a second. But the story setup, we basically have this video and Luke seems nervous and petrified, and he's also talking about how he's going to leave everybody soon and it's causing him anxieties and stress, and because of that, he's almost doomed the world. He is useless. He's like he's not very good, and that because of him, he's going to destroy the world. And then the story takes the framework. Part one is set on the framework of Luke's story. We go back a year, and we basically learn in an adventure fighting against the Sladine, which get a strange cameo because they got this really weird green colour tint to them. Yeah, it's very strange. But Luke basically explains to Sarah Jane that his school teachers basically think he's so smart he should go up a grade and go to Oxford early, to go to Oxford University. And Sarah Jane is like, you know, I feel like you should do what you need to do. If you want to do it, I'm in full support of that. And so it cuts to like a few days later in which Luke does take this test to go to Oxford University, and he passes with flying colours. And so it kicks off basically the starting of Luke leaving, in which he goes to university and is separated from the Sarah Jane adventure team. However, he's starting to... It's strange because he's starting to have... he's starting to become emotionally vulnerable he realises that Sarah Jane seems really comfortable with the fact that Luke just so happens to be leaving. She seems really, really just like, go get pack your bags, you're going to have an amazing time, there's nothing to worry about, it's absolutely fine. Almost dismaying his concerns and his feelings. Not really, but from Luke's point of view, that does what it kind of feels like. And what's great about this is that this kind of actually ties in with Sarah Jane Adventure's character. She has acted like this in the past with episodes like The Lost Boy, in which she emotionally distanced herself from Luke, as, she kind of felt like, Luke was kind of not tying her down, but she needs to be emotionally distanced, as well as episodes like The Last Centauran, in which she does this very similar storyline with Maria from that story, which was her leaving story. And so she has this, not like, she's sad or she doesn't want him there, but she's very quick to get him to Oxford. She's helps him pack up. She even sees Luke upset, and so she's like, come on, I got a present for you. And she shows him her old car and says, you can have it. And it's like, come on, get in the car, take a seat, you don't want to get your mother to drive you to Oxford all the time. And Luke kind of has this breakdown in probably one of my favourite scenes of the series so far. I mean, this got me, I will admit, I cried during this scene. And what's great about it, again, it works well in this story. You get all you want, all you need, the emotional grip in this story, but it works even more with the context of other episodes. Because Luke basically bursts us out on her, and he doesn't understand why Sarah Jane is so easy to letting him go. In fact, there's one point where he's like, when he's in the car, it's like, why don't I just drive off now? Why don't I just leave now? It seems like you don't want me here. This ties into elements like, I'm trying to think of that episode where, it's the Mona Lisa's Revenge, where Luke and Sarah Jane are very dissonant with each other in that story, because Luke doesn't know what Sarah Jane wants from him. And Sarah Jane gets in the car and she basically explains her emotional state, and she's like, no, I really don't want to go. I know you have to go though. You can't stick around with your mother all the time, but I'm also petrified because I was alone. It was just me and K9 for years. And then you came along and my life had meaning, it had joy again. After years of being alone without the doctor. And then the doctor appeared and it seemed like one day. And then you came along and it was brilliant and it was fun, and I don't want to lose that. And I even feel like I'm losing you in some sense, but I know that, this is part of life and this continues on. I burst out in tears. It's such an emotionally great scene. Also, I want to talk about is the music. Now, I've recently learned, this is probably like a error in my previous videos, but I've learned that at least in this story, the music is by a man called Sam Watts, I believe the name is. And his score here is really emotionally riveting. It's so well handled here. It might be over the top in certain scenes, but my God, does it really work. And then the story emotionally fucks with you. What do I mean by that? We have a scene where basically the characters are breaking down there, basically explaining their emotional states, and though there's no answer, the characters do kind of feel more connected with each other, despite there being no answers. Literally, the next scene is the first nightmare of the story. Now, I've stated before, when it comes to nightmare stories, dream stories, you can play it one or two angles. You can either go not the less interesting way, but the one way you could do it is just go balls to the walls weird with it, or you can do it a emotionally dripping story which blends reality with the dreams and tells stories in which characters can to really show off their emotional states through visual storytelling. This story takes the latter option, as Luke basically goes downstairs in his nightmare and he hears Sarah Jane. It's just like, that boy is so annoying. I had to pretend to say that I care and stuff, and then K9's like, he'll be gone soon. And Sarah Jane's just like, good riddance. As Luke wakes up and he freaks out. Now, Luke has established to have no dreams prior to this. He's never had a dream. So this is his first nightmare, his first experiences with it. And every time he has a nightmare, the story plays the emotional strings to just emotionally torture him. And sometimes that can be a negative of the story, where it just feels like it's just torturing a character to torture a character because, that's scripting television. But here, I feel like it's played just a way where, because it's a kids program, you can relate to Luke because he's suffering from essentially anxiety in an environment where he cannot trust his friends or family. He feels like everybody is either jealous of him or they don't want him around. And again, it works great in this story. You see it, his emotional state and what leads him up to this point in this story. But again, it also works better with the context of the series, because we've seen throughout the story that, Luke was created by the Bane, so essentially he's a clone, and he's abnormal, he's strange, he talks more logically than most kids, he seems to be an outsider, and he can see it, he knows it, and he tries to fit in, but he knows he can't. And though he has great friends like Rani and Clive, sometimes he still feels out of place to them. And this story plays with that. There's a great scene in which, in one of his nightmares, Rani and Clyde, because in this part of the story, Clyde and Rani are kind of down on the fact that Luke is leaving. Rani seems to be generally happy, but Clive doesn't really know how to handle it. He's kind of struggling with it, so he's been ignoring Luke in a sense. And so he's been having this nightmare where they basically laugh at him, saying, basically taking the mick at how smart he is and how weird he is, and also they don't want anything to do with him. And they say something, it's like, you're not even human, you're an alien. And then you hear Sarah Jane, it's like, did someone say aliens? With Clive, is just like, don't worry, Sarah Jane, we've got this one, because he's a loser. Oh Oh my god! What the hell is this story doing to me? I feel so bad for Luke. He's such a relatable character in this story. There's just too much great stuff to talk about. So let's talk about the villain of the series, because this is one of the elements which I say feels like a tortured episode, and also ties in with the villains like the Bojag and the Dream Lord in the trilogy of dreams, which I've headcanoned myself. The Nightmare Man. Now, how does he feel like a Torchwood character? Well, he's played by Julian Bleach. That's right, Davros himself, Julian Bleach. But Julian Bleach has also played a character in Torchwood, in Something in the Ring. And he basically plays the same character, a strange mystical entity that just seems to appear and absorbs the energy of people. He's essentially the same character, and he plays it phenomenally well. A lot of his movements, a lot of his actions reminds me a lot of Nosferatu from the 1910, it was in the 1911 film. It's really corny, a bit campy. Well, I say a bit, it's a really campy. We've got him on his shoulders and he's got him with his hands. A lot of hand movements with locked shoulders, and he kind of tiptoes everywhere. Also, let's get a petition to get Julian Bleach to play the Joker. That is just the best casting I've ever heard. Why don't we do that? And he basically is this entity that absorbs off the nightmare of children, and he basically gains energy from nightmares, and he basically uses Luke as this catalyst because if he gets enough energy from Luke, he can then recorporeal himself into the real world, and he basically then has free will to go into other people's nightmares and absorb their nightmares. Now, you could argue, like, why Luke? Because Luke hadn't dreamt at this point. But I feel like that's a plus on this story. It makes Luke such an invulnerable character because he doesn't know about dreams. He doesn't know how this emotional state is going. So you have a character who, at this moment, is not only emotionally vulnerable, but he's never really been emotionally vulnerable like this before. Now he's having nightmares for the first time in his life. He freaks out. He has no idea what to do. In fact, there's a great little plot where he's at a party, Luke's at a party, and there's this really great nightmare scene in which, like, he kind of dozes off. And I love it because this reminds me of my dreams, where you listen to music in real life and then you go in your dreams and you can kind of hear it like an echo, like it's coming from another room. Am I the only one that has dreams like that? Because this episode does that, and it reminds me of my dreams. So let me know in the comments if you have dreams like that. And then when he looks up, like, everybody's just like blank face and just swaying side to side, like not even dancing. And the Nightmare Man comes forth and he's just like, you are a loser. Your friends hate you. They're glad that you're going. They're celebrating the fact that you were going. And Ronnie's jealous of you, and your mother doesn't really want you there. She's glad that you're going. And that is why you're not even going to tell anybody about me, about my name. And Luke wakes up and he physically cannot tell Ronnie that the Nightmare Man has appeared to him, that there is this entity. He can tell her about his dreams, his nightmares, but he physically cannot tell her that there is a nightmare demon inside his dreams. I don't know if the story I think the story is trying to imply that there is this, he is kind of like psychically controlling him, so he physically cannot say the name. However, I feel like it's much more interesting if Luke is so terrified and really doesn't know where he is in this point in the story, that the fear in him is stopping him from telling others about the Nightmare Man. this story is just so good. What's really great about part one, which really works, the story is set from the viewpoint of Luke. It's told through like flashbacks essentially. And what's really great is that in part one, there's not a single scene without Luke. Luke is the point of view character in the story, and I don't think there's a single scene with him not in the story. And that really works with gripping our audiences to Luke, to this particular story. It kind of changes in part two, because in the cliffhanger for part one, which is a great cliffhanger, basically near the end of part one, the Nightmare Man basically is like, I've got enough energy from you, just one more nightmare, one more time you go to sleep, and I'm going to physically manifest. Which happens on the night where the last night Luke stays on Bannerman Road. And he's got the camera, he records himself speaking, which is at the start of the episode, and he tries to fight it, but he cannot wake up, cannot keep himself awake. So he goes to sleep and he has this nightmare where he's just in this black void as the Nightmare Man physically manifests, proving that he is an actual entity. It's not just Luke's nightmare. Although I think the story would have been so great as well if the Nightmare Man was just a fragment of Luke's imagination. But the Nightmare Man takes form, it takes reality, and Luke is stuck in this dream environment leading into part two. And part two could easily one of the best singular episodes of the revived era of Doctor Who. By far, it's easily up there with stories like Dalek and Heaven Sent. Because, my God, essentially the story breaks down where the Nightmare Man, he basically gets into the nightmare of Rani and Clive as well as Luke is trapped in this school corridor, and he's essentially taken the place of the Nightmare Man. So the Nightmare Man is in the physical world, and I love how Sarah Jane learns this by taking the camera recorder of Luke. She's just like, thinking about, feeling really bad, really down, and she doesn't want to let Luke know, so, because she's a very closed off individual, so she's watching it, just enjoying the memories, and it's here that she sees his recorded message from the previous episode, and sees the Nightmare Man manifest on the video camera, and that's how she learns about the threat. And Sarah Jane, at the end of the story, she really doesn't have much to do. In a sense, the story is mainly about Luke, Clive and Rani at this point, and this bit is phenomenal because we get to see each character's nightmares, and it ties into their characters throughout the story, and it just really works, with Rani's nightmare basically being about her being a journalist, because she joined the Sarah Jane team because she's an inspiring journalist, and she basically looks up to Sarah Jane as an apprentice to Sarah Jane, which gives her a very unique relationship to the rest of the team. And her nightmare is basically she kind of gets the job she wants. She goes on news as a journalist. However, she's nervous, she's tense, she really doesn't know what she's supposed to do, and she stutters and she seems uncomfortable. But not only that, the story, the topic she is supposedly supposed to tell in front of everybody on television is basically saying that Sarah Jane is putting innocent children at risk. Because that's kind of true. She is putting these kids in danger, and Rani can see that, but also she kind of looks up to Sarah Jane, which is why she goes with Sarah Jane, and her nightmare is about that, the dynamic, and she feels really bad for exploiting Sarah Jane, but this character who's a part of a manifestation of her is basically just like, you you know that Sarah Jane is dangerous. How many times have you, Clive, and Luke's, how many times have your lives been in danger because of her actions? And you're a journalist, you've got to stop thinking about emotions, and that you've got to, the public need to know this. They have a duty to know, to show this information to the rest of the world. Which kind of puts Rani in this very uncomfortable situation, because she really does want to become a journalist. But she kind of learns here that her dream job would put her in such an uncomfortable position in which morally she doesn't know if she should tell the world about Sarah Jane. And that's so fascinating. With Clive, on the other hand, he has this nightmare where he's basically working in this burger store. He's in this like an American, like a diner, and a really elderly Sarah Jane comes in, and she's just constantly talking about how amazing Luke is and how stupid Clive is, and keeps comparing them. And Clive's kind of becomes this, because Clive's character is that he's always trying to be the cool one. He's always trying to be the jokester of the class. And we've learned that one reason he does that is because he doesn't feel really confident in himself. He doesn't really feel like he's like the best, that he's the best he can make of. So why not be the Joker character? His father left him, Luke is leaving him, and his nightmare is that he's going to become this boring guy working in a diner, and being uncool and being unreasonable, whilst everybody else is being cool and awesome without him. That is just... writing in this is brilliant, because not only does that really work for the character, not only does that really tie in well, that gets a great payoff in the end of the episode. I do apologise, I haven't talked about part 2 as much as I wanted to, but this video is going long enough. So, and the ending of this story is just so great. So, spoiler warning if you don't want to be spoiled for this episode. And essentially, because Luke has swapped places with the Nightmare Man, he's able to connect Clive's and Rani's nightmares all together, so that they can not only stop each other from feeling these anxieties, but they can also actually meet up in this dream universe. And basically, it's up to Luke to inspire them to be like, right, we will always be, we're nervous, we have nightmares, we have suffered anxieties, there's no like real answer, but we are friends, we know each other, we understand each other, and that is more stronger than anything. Even you, Nightmare Man, and all the characters basically team up. They can basically overpower the Nightmare Man's control in the nightmare world. And so Luke sends the Nightmare Man to Clive's personal nightmare, his personal hell. And that's really great, because the tie into this is phenomenal, because he's trapped in Clive's nightmare, and he's just like, get me out of here, get me out. He turns to the elderly Sarah Jane in the nightmare, who constantly talks about how amazing Luke is. This nightmare becomes not Clive's nightmare, but it's the Nightmare Man. The one man who defeated him, Luke Smith, and he is now stuck in a world in which he is constantly told how amazing Luke is, putting him through this agony. The nightmare, the anxiety man, is in his own world of hell. Oh, man, that gets you right in the feels. And speaking of getting to the feels, the ending of the story in which Luke Smith, he's saying goodbye to everybody, and Sarah Jane basically knows that, Luke's not a very sociably person, so she lets K9 go with Luke to the university. there's a great scene in which it turns out that Mr. Smith is going to miss K9, and K9's just like, I knew you would go to miss me, as he goes off to meet Luke downstairs. Brilliant little bit of comedy there. And so that ends The Nightmare Man, and is the last regular appearance of Tommy Knight as Luke Smith. Holy hell, this was awesome. This easily has become, by far, my favourite episode of the series. Better than Temptation of Sarah Jane. Better than Wedding of Sarah Jane. Better than... just better. Mark of the Berserker. Better than Mark of the Berserker. This is great television. And this could have easily been in this Doctor Who or even Torchwood. But the fact that it happens in Sarah Jane, and the sad notion that this is the last time Luke would have a regular story with his mother, sadly because of course the passing of Elizabeth Sladen, this just makes this story so much poignant in retrospective. But it's such a great story to have as a send-off to this character, and it's just a great story. Just go watch it. 10 out of 10. No, sorry, 11 out of 10. That good. Go watch it. So that's The Nightmare Man. So join me next time where the Doctor, Amy and Rory will be having their own little adventure in Dreamland, as the Doctor comes face to face with a character who seems familiar to him, but he has never met before, as Amy and Rory have to decide whether to stay on the TARDIS or to live a life without the Doctor. So join me next time for Amy's Choice, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!